one of the themes of scientific history is until the telescope, we couldn't see the moons of Jupiter. Until we couldn't see the moons of Jupiter, we couldn't figure out that Kepler's laws made sense. And you would never have determined that the Earth was revolving around the sun until you had the telescope. And so an instrument allows you to prove, to break a paradigm, and the paradigm leads to Newton's laws, and that leads to the calculus and the calculus of variations, and then the entire modern world changes. And the same is true with the microscope. So a technology, an instrument gets sufficiently good enough that it breaks the paradigm. Oh, germs. Maybe not believe people to death, right? But it all kind of starts with things like grinding glass into optics to see a very small thing or see a very far away thing. Now, and Bitcoin, it required PGP. It required the internet. It required chips, not analog chips, digital chips, right? And semiconductors and CPUs. So that being the case, right? The third prong of the Bitcoin stool is engineering. And the thing that's beautiful about Bitcoin is it's a balanced, stable, engineered system. But the way you get there is by combining energy, electricity, and something thermodynamically scarce with hardware, with semiconductors, with software. Right? And with cryptography. So there's like an element of math and cryptography, and there's an element of semiconductors, and you're running them with electricity. When you put all three of them together in an open protocol, then what you have is something which is stable that spreads virally, and eventually you get, the ASIC wars. And then what happens is people build big Bitcoin mining centers. And everybody thinks, oh, that's bad, that's centralizing. But of course, the mining centers suck up so much electricity that they eventually have to run to the edge of the grid, and they're always running away from the center of civilization to the person that has the stranded energy, because you need almost zero cost energy. So what does that do? Well, that creates a phrase, balance of power, right? I mean, which is, it means a lot of different things, but we need a balance of power for the system to be stable. And how do I make it unstable? I take away the hardware component. If I go to proof of stake, all of a sudden your balance of power means, well, I don't need $5 billion a year of electricity. So that means people that have electricity are not actors. And I don't need hardware anymore. And that means that there's no inertia from the hardware. And now I just need a software node. And now, of course, all of those nodes can be running in the Amazon cloud, or they could collapse down to 27 computers in one city. And you wouldn't know, and B, you wouldn't care. And so the system becomes very, very fragile. Aeronautical engineers are very sensitive to this. One of the reasons that they like Bitcoin, I think, is in an aircraft, you have to consider all these factors. The shape of the aircraft matters, but the avionics matter, but the balance matters, but the conditions matter. And when you design the aircraft, someone goes, yeah, I just want to change the couch. You want to change the couch and put a different couch in an aircraft. They might charge you $96,000 of engineering to actually run the weights, the balances. They got to consider, will the couch catch fire? In the event of a crash landing, right? Is the couch rated for 16 Gs, or will the couch break? And there are a lot of good philosophers and Austrian economists. One system fails, one system gets jammed. There's a storm, there's wind shear. But people that build spaceships, and people that build airplanes, they actually have to consider a circumstance where one system fails, one system gets jammed, there's a storm, there's wind shear, and all of those things are irrelevant except in the last 15 seconds of the flight, when they're certainly going to kill you. And they have to design the system such that in the last 15 seconds of the flight, if such and such happens, we don't all die.
But Bitcoin's similar to that. Austin Hill said this to me. He said, He said the engineer of Bitcoin needs to be like aircraft engineering or rocket engineering, in that you cannot have a catastrophic failure. A catastrophic bug, I mean, look, I know Bitcoin's had it in the past, but a catastrophic inflation bug could be terminal for Bitcoin.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah.
I totally agree. The more you know about engineering, and I think the more you know about economics, and the more you know about ethics, the more conservative and the more considerate you become about any change to the protocol. Like you radically change from proof of work to proof of stake. It's not just an engineering lapse where you centralize and you make the system unstable. It's also an ethical lapse, because now you've actually created a staking network and you converted a commodity into a security, an investment contract, and it's, it's also an economic lapse long term, because you have destroyed part of the free market that was supporting your network, right? You've just nationalized $20 billion worth of mining rigs and seized them. And now you've just disincentivized any miner from ever investing in your ecosystem ever again. And you've disincentivized anybody else. If a government seizes $10 billion of your property, you want to invest money in that country, right? So it's an economic disaster to nationalize property, and it's an ethical disaster to steal from somebody or to seize control of what should be a decentralized network or a commodity network. But also it's an engineering disaster, because you've basically taken something which is anti-fragile, nearly indestructible, that is guaranteed to get more secure technically over time, and you've converted it into a bunch of software running on a server, and you're hoping that the 5 people that control the updates don't get compromised. Right? If I get control of the people that control the code that release or unrelease staked assets, that's a problem. But you could shut down all Bitcoin development, right? And arrest every single developer. The miners are going to keep working. And someone would spin up a new development group in some other country, and start to work from where we left off. So I think that system engineers are just naturally they're very thoughtful, and they want to create self-stabilizing systems. For example, you design an airplane, you put the wings down like this, it's unstable. Okay, it'll spin fast, but that means it'll go into a tailspin or a death spiral, crash and burn, if you lose control of it for 50 milliseconds or 100 milliseconds. That's a very dangerous machine. You need very complicated software. If you design the plane with the wings swept up like this, when it turns like this, what happens is this wing loses lift, this wing gets more lift, and it wants to come back to center. Just like why are ships designed with a certain hull shape? Because when it goes like this, you want it to swing back. Why don't we put a big weight on top of the ship, like over the mast? Because when it goes like this, it wants to capsize. So ocean engineers, civil engineers, aeronautical engineers, mechanical engineers, they know that software is useful, but software is not all the end all be all, right? It's your relationship to the laws of thermodynamics and the laws of gravity, right? And Reynolds law and viscosity, and it's your relationship to Maxwell's equations and electromagnetics, et cetera. Those things determine whether you crash and burn and sink. And if you've got a stable vehicle or a stable network, yeah, you can write some software, and maybe you need some software, right? I mean, I need software in an airplane, and you can, and well done, software makes it safer. But when the software engineers get out of control, like on the Boeing 737 MAX, and someone says, Well, we have to upgrade the software and we have to do the latest, greatest, right? And let's just go ahead and get the update out. The result is the software actually overrides the human, makes the plane unstable, and crashes the plane and kills everybody. And maybe it kills the entire company.
I mean, that also, wasn't that a software hack to solve a problem whereby they wanted to upgrade the plane for bigger engines, but they didn't want to upgrade the hull? I can't remember what part of the
fuselage?
Yeah, the fuselage. They didn't want this. And so they ended up, it was a hack really, wasn't it? But it's again, it's come back to systems engineering. They tried to hack around what they should have done, which is build a new fuselage.
I'm going to tell you two quick stories. One is if you look at the 737, it was designed in the late 60s.
Yeah.
And the shape of the 737 and the style of it, once you have a fuselage design, you've worked that out in a wind tunnel and that's stable. You can generally make it a little bit longer without having to redo all the engineering. But if you make it wider or change the shape, every single assumption gets thrown out the door. Change the shape of the fuselage slightly, the plane crashes and burns, and it becomes a $10 billion or $100 billion exercise to do a new plane. That's why the 737 didn't change for 40 years. The Gulfstream 5 is based upon the design of the Gulfstream 4, based on the design of the Gulfstream 3, based on the design of the Gulfstream 2, which is a 70s aircraft. So for 40 years, the Gulfstream didn't change. Global Express, same thing. You don't want to change these airplanes. And that teaches aeronautical engineers to be humble.